Hi everybody, I'm Rosa. Today I'm going to show you a really cool science experiment where you can make a submarine in this fun challenge. But first, I'm going to talk a little bit about what makes something sink or float. Now, you might think that heavy things sink and light things float. And it's not exactly that. It has to do with what's called density. And density is how much something weighs compared to how much space it takes up. So imagine this plastic container. This is how much space it takes up. And if you put it in the water, you can see it floats on top. To understand why this floats, imagine you had a second plastic container, exactly the same size and shape as this one, except made out of solid water. If you were to compare these two plastic containers, the real one and the imaginary one, the one made of water would weigh more. That means that water is more dense than this container, and that's why it floats. If you had a solid plastic container that was solid all the way through, it would sink, and that's because it weighs more than an amount of water that takes up the exact same amount of space. Now, what would happen if you had a plastic container that was exactly as dense as water, meaning it would weigh exactly the same amount as an identical plastic container made of water? Well, that's what today's challenge is all about. So what you're going to need for this is a plastic bucket like this one. I've used one that's clear so that you can see through it, but if you don't have one, you can also just fill up your bathtub or sink. Next, you're going to need a plastic container just like this one. If you have one that's smaller, it's going to be easier than if you have one that's bigger. Then you're going to need a couple of rubber bands, and you're going to want some little heavy objects. So I'm using quarters, but you can also use beads, beans, rocks, marbles, or whatever else you might have. What you're going to try to do is fill up a plastic container with a couple of those little heavy objects and try to get it to float partway down the water. So you don't want it to be floating on top and you don't want it to be touching the bottom. You want to see if you can get it to float partway down. And once you've done that, that means that you've made the container exactly as dense as the water, or pretty close. So I've tried it, it took me a while, but here's my container and I'm going to show you how it works. I think I've got it, so I got this. I'm just going to add my rubber band around it. The rubber band will help keep the air out, but some water will still get in, so make sure that you only use objects that won't get ruined if they get wet. And let's put this in the water. I hope you enjoy this experiment and you can try it at home. See you later!